Hi everyone. It's been a little while, and I wanted to make this video because I was reflecting on my career after China. And I know for me, when I was living in China, I had the thought of what do I want to do with my life as far as work goes. And it seemed like a very difficult situation to transition from teaching English to something else. So I wanted in this video to give advice to people who are going to China or already in China and they don't know how to transition out of being an English teacher, or maybe they do want to continue teaching English as a second language, uh, but in some other capacity, or they just want to continue in China and grow and rise up the ranks in English or start their own business. So uh, maybe I can share a little bit about my story. Um, Before I went to China, I was an English teacher in Honduras. And how I got that job was I knew some people who had volunteered in Honduras helping out. They did some teaching at the school, some of them. And what I did was when I was in college, I volunteered for a couple years in classroom settings, in, at my university, in churches, one-on-one tutoring, a whole variety of settings, editing people's papers for, you know, people who didn't have English as their first language. So I got involved with that, and so because of that, I was able to get that job in Honduras teaching at the school for a year. And then I left Honduras and I came back to the US and I talked to someone else who also had been in Honduras in the past but went to China and really liked it. And he said, hey, you should check out China. There's a lot of good opportunity there to teach English. And so for me at the time, I couldn't get a job in the US with my skills, and I don't know if I had the right attitude. The economy was not so great, and I just didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest, in many regards. And I think a lot of people that I taught with in China were kind of in the same boat. So maybe you would find yourself in the same boat. You don't know exactly what you want to do. Maybe you like teaching English, you like traveling, but you don't know for work exactly what it is that you want to do. So I decided to go to China to teach and found out there was a lot of opportunity there to teach English, to get some good work experience, make some money, save money. And so let me back up a little here. If you do want to go to China to teach English, you should very much get that teaching experience before going to China. And that can be in the form of volunteer work. It can be some other form here in the US, some of the ways that I described that I did it. Yes, I did have that year of experience teaching in the school in Honduras, which helped a lot. But I know people who have gone to China to teach English who have never taught it before. Now, one thing that can help you is getting a TEFL certificate or TESL, TESL certificate. It stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language or Teaching English as a Second Language certificate. And the company that I taught for, EF English First, they did reimburse me for that. They required getting that certificate, and then they reimbursed the money for that later. It's a 40-hour online, and that can help you if you do want to transition into a new job in China. Having that certificate is very important. Now, there are other options you can do, like a 120-hour certificate and other things. And there are some jobs that prefer that. It's not essential, but if you do really, really want to, you can get that certificate. There are other higher level teaching English as a second language certificates you can get. I recommend researching those and getting those. Got TEFL is one that I can think of, and some others. Those can be a little more expensive, and I recommend getting those if you want to do that for a very long time abroad. Now, in America, that kind of certificate doesn't necessarily hold weight. So if you do want to transition back into America to teach English as a second language, that's not so important uh, from what I know. Uh, if you do want to teach English as a second language in the United States, to transition back, you can search around for some online programs where you can study to get your state teaching certificate to teach in a particular state. And there are some areas you can do that online, but that would help you to transition back into the U.S. to teach in a public school. Now, for me, I taught English. I went to China. I taught English for 3.5 years in total. Some of that was for adults. Some of that was for middle school / high school age students. And so I had a decent variety of experience. And also, the thing that for me was the most important for getting the job that I have now in the US was starting my own English business in China and running that business. And I'll say, I say that because right now I work in sales in the US in technology sales. Totally different field from teaching English as a second language. Now, how I got into this field was obviously coming back to the US to work in sales would be a big jump. So what we did was I applied for hundreds of jobs to teach in a school in the US, private school, because I did not have a teaching certificate and only private schools could hire me to teach in their school. Uh, so I applied for hundreds of jobs. I did not apply on any job websites. I sent my resume directly to the principal of the school. I went to the school website, found the principal's email address, and sent my resume to the school. And I applied for jobs in all different states. My native state of New Jersey, other states. And I ended up getting about 7 interview requests from these different schools. So it was a lot, which was very interesting. And that was because I had a variety, not only from my English teaching background, but in college, I studied religion, so I could teach that, Spanish, and I lived in Honduras. I could speak Spanish fluently, so I could teach Spanish as well. And also um, English as a second language, as well as Mandarin, because I did have a Mandarin certificate. You can see one of my other videos taking the HSK test, where I can give you more information there about getting a Chinese proficiency certificate. So there were 4 different things that I could teach. Now, I only had experience teaching English as a second language, but I want you to think about, what did you study in college? What are some of your other skills that you can teach? So these are things that you can use to your advantage when getting an interview. And when you're presenting this email with your resume to these schools, I want you to have a good opinion of yourself uh, and point out your strengths, what you can offer to the school, some things about your experience, and have a very positive attitude in your email. There's a big difference for me just changing my attitude in the email of kind of begging or for a job or just being very bland and boring to having an exciting tone in my email and pointing out some of my experience, skills, and things that I could offer, some unique things, such as coaching sports, and that I threw that in there. And so that, also timing. Timing is very important if you want to transition back into the U.S. or your native country if you want to continue teaching in a school. So if you sent your resume, obviously, in November or let's say January, It's not great timing to teach in a elementary school, middle school, high school. They're obviously the school ends in the summer, and there are some people who have announced that they will be leaving the school early. So what you should do is probably start sending your resumes in April, May, June, July, and August. Is a little bit later, but I'm sure there are still schools that need people at that time. So that's the time frame I would recommend you sending your resumes over to the school. Big difference for me was when I was sending my resumes in January and February, I got almost no responses. The timing was off. So timing is very important. I started again sending my resumes in, maybe around May, June, July, uh, to hundreds of schools. If you only send your resume to um, 20, 30 schools and you don't get an interview, that's not enough. It needs to be hundreds, right? And the results pay off. So I sent it to hundreds, and I got 7 interview requests. I actually ended up accepting the first school that I had the interview with because they offered to pay for relocation allowance for me to transition back, $5,000, which was very generous, and it was great to help me get back into the U.S. And the salary was decent for a private school. So those two things, and also it gave me the ability to teach a variety of things that would be much more interesting than just teaching English as a second language. So I got the chance to teach English as a second language to Chinese students in the school, religion, and Mandarin. So that was a lot of fun doing that kind of variety. I enjoyed the variety, and that was very attractive for me. So I decided just to take it and not bother so much with the other interviews that were out there. Maybe I could have gotten a better offer, but already that offer was very good, and I wanted to accept it without waiting and having them move on to somebody else. So that's essentially why I did that. So for you, you can keep some of those points in mind if you are trying to transition out of teaching. You may want to teach for a year or 2 years in the U.S. if you can. Now, I plan on teaching for longer, but it was just unsustainable for having a family. Making a teacher salary in private school, the benefits weren't as good as public school. So I want you to keep those things in mind as well if you have a family, to support your family with your job. Now, the way I transitioned out of teaching in the U.S. into sales was, as I mentioned before, we had our own business in China, teaching English, having cultural events. And in order to do that, we had to create advertisements. We used social media. We had to sell. I had to sell the courses that I was teaching to the students. I had to sell these courses to adult students, for example. Hey, take my online course on QQ that I'm offering, or face to face. Here are some courses, and I had to sell these to the parents if it was for kids, or to adult students. And so I had to make many sales presentations in Chinese and English. Also, as a teacher, there are a lot of skills that can transfer over to sales. The ability to get people to believe in what you're talking about, and those sorts of things, making presentations, those sorts of things. And so keep in mind all the skills that you have acquired through teaching and how they can transition into your next job. And if you are in China, don't just teach English in your job and then in the evening do whatever you feel like. I strongly recommend while you're in China to acquire as many skills and experience as possible outside of teaching if eventually you want to get out of teaching. So that can be starting your own kind of business. Maybe there are a lot of people who want to start foreign restaurants. If you have experience in the restaurant business, which I did, and I helped some people with their restaurant ideas, you can do things like that as well. International trade is very big. Now, I want you to be careful of the visas. I have another video about visas in China. So when you're going to China to teach, you must get the Z visa for going over there to work. That's the work visa. If the if the place you're going to teach for does not offer the Z visa, or they say you need to get it yourself, pay for it yourself, forget it. Run the other way. They should be paying for that Z visa for you and sponsoring you to work there. Now, one of the issues is you're not allowed to work for other companies while you're having this Z visa, technically speaking. People do it, but just keep it in mind that you need to be careful with that Z visa, and you must have it to work in China. There's also another kind of visa with regards to international business. If you want to open your own business there, that's a different type of visa. There's a marriage visa, which you're technically not supposed to be working on. And there's the tourist visa. You're not supposed to be working on that. And the student visa, same with that. And if they find you working in a school or a company and you have one of those other visas, you would be deported if they found out, and that's happened many times. So make sure you follow that rule while you're in China, and just get as many skills and work experience as possible while you're there if you want to transition into something else or go back to your home country. Learn Mandarin, become as fluent as possible in it. Take the HSK test that I said before. A lot of times your company will pay for your Chinese lessons, so take advantage of that. That's one skill you can and should acquire while you're there, and that can be very useful for you when you come back to the United States or whatever country you're from. And yeah, so I was able to get this job in sales now because I had done sales in China trying to sell the courses that I had created for the students. And so this is, try to be creative and think of what you can do that can transition over. You can go into editing newspaper type of things, and so there's just a variety of things that you can do in that sense. If you do work in a school in China and you can coach a sport, that's great. You can take that coaching experience and bring it back to the U.S. if you're going to teach in a school. Some people can do. I know someone that did video production, so working at one of the companies that I worked at in China, they volunteered to do some video production for the company and make promotional videos. Eventually, he transitioned out of teaching into full-time video production, and he started doing that while at our company for free, volunteering to do that. And so think of what you can start doing now in your company or school that you can develop some other type of skills besides teaching if you want to transition out of teaching. And if you want to stay in teaching and you really like it, try to get some other kinds of certificates that can boost your level. There are some schools that pay more in China and elsewhere if you have those certificates, such as a state certificate. They even pay more in China if you have that home that state certification from home. So also, if you want to become an administrator in a school, there are some administration certificates you can get. There are colleges in China as well where you can study for your MBA, master's degree in some form. So go for that. If you have any questions, you can ask me down below. I'd be happy to answer them for you, give you some career advice if you're stuck and don't know what to do. And yeah, feel free to subscribe if you want to learn more about China. And I'll see you in the next video.